So 2003 hits, and we get a new Terminator movie, Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. But how could this happen? Wasn't the second one neatly wrapped up? Wasn't James Cameron done with the franchise? Well, apparently the rights had been sold to another production company, and they really wanted to make this profitable blockbuster franchise live again. And why wouldn't they? When there's money on the table, you try and cash it. So with Arnold Schwarzenegger signed back on to reprise his role as the Terminator, we get Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. I thought that this was... Okay, when you look at the way that the Terminator franchise has evolved, you have the first movie, which is obviously more horror-based. The second one, which certainly becomes more of an action movie, but an action movie was still hard. I just found that this one was a complete action movie, where I don't get attached to any of the characters. It's just a spectacle for the sake of a spectacle with a character that you're already familiar with and a universe that you're already familiar with.
You know, I got the great fortune of seeing this twice, Eric. And the first time I said, okay, it's pretty benign and it didn't do any harm to me. And getting to watch it a second time, I feel like that's that's the decider when you see a movie a second time. And I couldn't get into it at all. I thought it was really, really dull.
I think dull is a good word for this franchise because I don't feel like anyone has that spark, that energy in this movie to try. It just feels like a machine, pardon the pun,
exactly.
that Hollywood has produced to try and make some extra money off people who are fans of this franchise.
Yeah, it doesn't have the James Cameron touch. You have to, obviously going into it, you shouldn't go in expecting James Cameron type film.
I'm gonna go ahead and disagree. I still thought that this was, for what it's worth, a pretty good movie. I mean, I can acknowledge that, yes, it does kind of repeat a lot of the beats from Terminator 2. Specifically, you've got another chase scene involving this 18-wheeler truck. There's another scene where Arnold has to kind of gun down a big group of police cars.
There's the ever-repeating scene of them having to try and find clothes in the beginning of the movie.
It always a delight. How does Arnold look naked in this one? Do you guys want?
I found Arnold look better naked in this one than he did in Terminator 2.
No kidding.
I don't know. I found he was leaner but more muscular in that leanness.
Jonathan?
And he got a new pair of glasses. But I didn't like the new pair of glasses.
Anyway, you were saying?
He was moving with the time.
So it repeats a lot of the beats, but didn't you find that it didn't have the energy of the other one?
I still found, like the other ones, this is an extremely well-paced movie. There's, again, our heroes constantly on the run. There's always things happening. The action scenes themselves, I thought, were very well shot. There's a lot there, again, because of the increased budget and the time since the previous movie, the action scenes in this one are kind of another step. They're like another step up. They're a bit more
over the top, crazier, bigger.
They're bigger. I wouldn't necessarily say over the top.
Well, like I said before, I had the fortune of seeing it twice. And seeing it twice made me realize how much I didn't want to revisit it again because these action scenes, they become exhaustible after a while. And I realized there was nothing to see more than once. And again, like we said, they did this to cash in on another opportunity. And with that said, it was sure to entertain people, and I think that's all it was. That's all its purpose was. I don't think it wanted to go down as anything special other than quick cash.
I mean, okay, sure, there was a lot of action. I didn't really find it overwhelmingly action-packed. And yes, I think that the characters were probably a lot weaker in this one compared with the previous ones. That could be just some combination of the writing, and I don't feel that the actors' performances themselves gave these characters a lot of personality that made you feel attached to them. However, at the same time, we do have kind of the conclusion, seemingly the conclusion to the whole Terminator story of will Judgment Day happen or not? And so that's what I feel kind of gives this movie a strength, is that you're finally seeing whether or not they're going to be able to prevent Skynet from taking over.
I still think that those elements are really great because they still have a really dark sense of there's a darkness to it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I feel like it's probably been meddled with by other people to make it more entertaining because I thought it had potential to do something pretty good. Although, like I said, I still don't think it should have made another one. But given the basics of the plot, I thought it could have worked.
I think the problem with this franchise is you're coming from two very strong previous movies. and movies that not only deliver well on action but also deliver well on heart. So to make this movie into a mindless action movie is not great because you have a lot to live up to. So they weren't able to recapture, I found, the same level of action in this movie because I found a lot of it was just computer generated. So I found myself having more trouble being invested in it. I found that the characters themselves were also weaker. I think right off the bat when you start watching the movie after the John Connor voiceover, the movie starts with like a really bad CGI bubble that the characters come out of.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
So right over there, it already feels like it's a departure from the James Cameron practical effects, pace yourselves. It just starts straight away.
Well, I mean, okay, I'm not going to put much criticism on the bubble that they time travel in. I mean...
No, but it's what the bubble represents.
It's just a fucking bubble, guys!
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, okay, the bubble looks a little bit more detailed, kind of enhanced by CGI. Whatever, it doesn't really bother me that much. And the action scenes themselves, I didn't feel like they used that much CGI. Like, there were maybe only small points within the action scenes that used CGI, and most of it at least looked pretty practical. I mean, I definitely didn't feel like the CGI was overdone.
I think, one thing I wanted to mention about the action sequences is in the previous one, when, there was the big chase sequence with the truck and Arnold's on the motorcycle. That whole scene occurs and then it ends with the truck exploding. So you get your big explosion at the end.
Sure.
I found with this movie, they put a lot of explosions like right at the beginning of action sequence or in the middle of an action sequence. And I find when you do that, you're like, that's your big finale for a chase sequence. It's the explosion is earned. It wasn't earned in these movies. It was just more of a spectacle.
I felt the same way overall about the movie. Just
you didn't feel the explosions were well placed?
No, I just thought there was two. I thought the sequences were some of them were overlong and they became tedious. And I'm someone who gets turned off by overly long action sequences where mindless explosions keep happening.
Again, I didn't really feel like these were those types of action scenes. I felt like the action scenes were pretty justified as far as their length goes. It basically meant that our characters were constantly under, threat of attack.
Right.
Well, not even threat of attack, actual attack. And they had to kind of fight their way out, like especially towards the end of the movie, which is maybe where you felt the action got a bit overlong.
Yeah, in the lab, that was...
yeah, exactly. But I mean, they're in a base that is where Skynet was built and where all these machines were built. So, of course, I'm actually surprised they got out of there with so little fighting.
That's true, actually.
Yeah, you make a decent point.
I think...
I mean, they only killed like 2 or 3 of those tank robots when we saw an entire bunker filled with them.
She only activated one.
No, she activated a bunch of them.
I think
it's implied she activated pretty much every robot in that garage.
She activated a couple. But I think, like it said about many stories, your good guys are only as good as your bad guys.
Right.
And I think that is really the biggest weakness of this movie is the female TX character. I think the actress was not great. I think she was just trying to do...
okay.
I think she was there for eye candy, to be honest.
I really think so, too. I think she was just trying to imitate what Robert Patrick had done, and she wasn't a good enough actress to do that, and she didn't even try and put her own spin on it.
I mean, she's playing a robot. She can't be that much of a character.
No, but I just found it felt like a woman doing a Robert Patrick Terminator impression. And I think, like Jonathan said, she was eye candy in the sense of, okay, well, we'll put the female Terminator in there because it's different, and people like female, sexy female characters wearing leather suits for the whole movie, you know what I mean?
Tight leather suits.
Arnold also wore leather suits the whole movie.
And we already talked about his
body. Arnold. We all talked about his body.
Yeah.
The anatomy of Arnold.
And I think, well, you look at Robert Patrick's character in Terminator 2, he was liquid metal, and you get to see him actually using his abilities to, go through walls, blend with his surroundings, transform his body. You see what his powers can do. I found this Terminator, her powers weren't very clearly identified.
Yeah, it wasn't clear if she definitely wasn't totally liquid metal. She was some kind of mix between a skeleton and the metal part.
And that's why I think it's weak. It's like if you're not even establishing what your villain is, what's the point?
Anyway, I feel like this movie was still strong because, you didn't have a lot of the great characterization that the other ones had because, partially because of the writing and partially because the actors' performances, I find, didn't really lend much personality to these characters other than, generic male protagonist and generic female protagonist. But nevertheless, I felt like it was a story that had been built up to from the other Terminator movies of what's going to happen when is Skynet going to be able to take over? Is Judgment Day going to happen?
Like
or are they
the
gonna
actual taking over of the machine.
Exactly. Like it had, like there was that part of the story, and that managed to kind of compel you through the whole movie. And they didn't go for the easy ending where they managed to stop Skynet at the last second. In fact, they go for the really dark ending where after all that time,
like I said, I thought that worked.
It was
just
inevitable.
that they didn't. It wasn't just that they didn't. I feel like it wasn't earned.
Yeah.
I feel like it was pretty earned. I mean, it just shows that. I mean, yeah, it does kind of conflict with some of the messages from the previous movies. But
Yeah, it does. It does conflict. I thought that could have potential.
Like the entire tagline of "Fate is what you make it."
right, and now this is our in that
It's
maybe in the
inevitable,
future.
so.
And, in the future it might be written already. Like
Yeah.
there was. I thought that worked. It could have worked a lot better than it did.
well, maybe it's just a sign of the characters kind of, again, just the story getting darker and the characters, in fact, realizing that, no, we actually can't change things.
Right.
Isn't this a super dark ending, guys?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that was interesting. And then once you end it like that, the next thing you have to go to is, okay, maybe we'll do a trilogy about actually fighting the war.
Good idea.
Which, okay,
Well,
whatever
we'll see
that's
how that works
But
out.
before we get to that, I want to really talk about John Connor, because if you look at, again, going back to his character in T2, he goes through an entire arc of being, a troublesome kid, and then he finally gets some responsibility and has to learn to let go of his father figure in his life. Whereas this movie, I just found he was a very bland character.
He was kind of portrayed as a bit of a screw up. He was always on the run, didn't really have any.
He wasn't really established. Because at the end of the day, the entire Terminator franchise is about John Connor and him becoming the great military leader in the future.
Yeah, and we didn't really see that in this movie.
But he
No,
doesn't
and-
want, I like the fact that what I did like is that he doesn't want that role. He didn't want that the weight of the world on his shoulders. And it just didn't develop it any further than it could have.
I think he was very bland throughout the whole movie. I didn't know what his personal character motivations were. I didn't find he had an
But that's
arc
what I'm
other
saying.
than just...
They didn't develop from there.
He didn't have an arc other than just showing up at the ending on the microphone.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I was saying this while we were
He
watching.
doesn't take any leadership role in this movie.
Yeah, exactly. Like he doesn't do anything to really indicate why or how he became this amazing leader, other than just answering a call on the microphone at the end of the movie.
Exactly.
I was actually saying during the movie, this really just feels like Arnold's movie.
Yeah. And they paid him, I think, like $30 million to do
Yeah.
it, and
God damn it.
put his name on top. Like, he was the star of the movie, and I think, again, that lends itself to being a problem, because even though he's a fun action star and all that, he's a robot. You can't really identify or get attached to this character, because not attached like in the way that maybe Terminator 2 you attach to him because he has that close relationship with John, but him just being the mindless action star to do the action sequences, he's not the character that you're necessarily gravitated towards.
Well, yeah, he should be a secondary
Yeah.
thought.
He's the muscle.
Yeah,
the
he's the
body
muscle.
guard.
You should never be.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I feel like a lot of the love for the Terminator just is kind of not really generated by the movie itself, but it's rather carried over from what we felt for him in the previous movies.
Yeah. I also found Arnold in this movie wasn't necessarily acting like the machine that he was in the previous two movies.
Yeah, he had a little bit more humor and emotion to this. Just a little bit.
But I found that wasn't necessarily because that humor wasn't necessarily because like John taught him it or anything. He just
They just had to make him a more likable star because he was now carrying the movie.
Yeah, and I found, okay, well, that already pulls me out of the movie because I don't feel like this is a robot character. I just feel like this is Arnold Schwarzenegger being Arnold Schwarzenegger leading action man.
I don't know. Again, I still feel like I was it was a bit cheating because I'm still attached to Arnold, the Terminator as a character from the previous two movies, so I didn't mind that as much. What do you mean? I mean, no, I do acknowledge that he's just kind of playing like a more of a conventional action hero in this movie as opposed to the protector that he was in the previous movies. And that, again, is partially just because John and Catherine Brewster didn't really feel that compelling as protagonists themselves. So it's almost like Arnold kind of fell into that role as the protagonist.
Yeah, he was really pushing them along throughout the plot rather than like them suggesting, okay, we should go here, we should go here. He's more telling them, no, we have to go to this location, we have to go to this location.
Why'd you sound Indian?
I don't know. That was weird.
That was terrible.
My accents are bad.
And also, there was totally a part where Catherine Brewster said, like, no, we're going to go save my dad. And he's like, okay. We're continuing with Indian Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Thank you, come again.
I'll be back.
All right.
Anyway.
Oh, Mr. Homer.
So yeah, I mean, I still felt it was a decent movie. Maybe I wouldn't have liked it as much if they went for the whole humans win ending. But I think that just because they did actually have the guts to go for the dark, everybody loses ending, I just kind of respect the movie a little bit more for that, and that kind of takes it out of just mindless cash grab territory for me. Although I do acknowledge that it owes a lot of what it does right. It owes to kind of some of the plot points set by Terminator 2 as far as the action scenes go.
All right. So those are our thoughts on Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines.